They laughed at his damaged armor, until he took it off, silencing the room before the alien. For the day was cold, the sky a dull gray over the broken landscape of the war-torn planet of Cascara Prime. Once a thriving world, it now lay in ruins, a casualty of the galactic war that had raged for decades. From the shattered buildings to the barren plains, every corner of this planet screamed of the violence that had scarred it. The human forces had been fighting here for what seemed like an eternity, trying to hold the line against the advancing alien invaders who sought to claim the planet as their own. Sergeant Ethan Blackwell, a soldier of the legendary human Death Guard, was one of the last to arrive in the capital city, a city that was now little more than a husk of its former self. His armor was battered with scorch marks, dents, and scratches all over it. It had been through countless battles, and each mark told a story. Some were from firefights with alien marauders, others from the vicious traps set by enemy forces. There were even dents from hand-to-hand combat, a testament to the brutality of the war. Despite the damage, his armor still carried a certain imposing presence, but to the untrained eye it looked old and useless. Inside the heavily guarded conference room of the Council of the Seven, a coalition of the most powerful alien factions in the galaxy, the atmosphere was tense. The alien leaders had gathered for peace talks, hoping to bring an end to the ongoing conflict. But it wasn't just any peace talk. It was the last attempt to negotiate with the humans. After months of failed diplomacy and constant skirmishes on Cascara Prime, the aliens were growing impatient. If these talks failed, they had no choice but to continue the war. Ethan Blackwell, known among his comrades as Blackjack, stepped into the room with a quiet confidence. His team had already taken their positions near the back of the room, a group of elite soldiers who had seen the worst of the war. But Ethan wasn't here to show off his strength. He wasn't here to boast of the victories he had won or the enemies he had killed. He was here to do what he did best, survive. As he walked to the center of the room, the alien delegates took notice. Some eyed him with interest, while others couldn't hide their laughter. The aliens had been briefed on human soldiers, but this was their first time seeing one up close. They weren't sure what to make of the human who stood before them, his battered armor glinting faintly in the light. To them, it was an eyesore, a symbol of the human's inability to keep up with the superior technology of the galaxy's most advanced species. A tall alien with green skin and multiple eyes snickered as he watched Ethan approach the negotiation table. "Is this a joke?" the alien asked in a low voice, clearly loud enough for everyone to hear. "The humans sent a damaged soldier in broken armor to negotiate for them." The other delegates chuckled, their voices echoing around the room. The laughter wasn't just a reaction to Ethan's appearance, it was a statement. The aliens had never taken the humans seriously. To them, humanity was still a young, inexperienced species that didn't know its place in the universe. Sure, they had fought fiercely in the war, but in the grand scheme of things, they were still insignificant. Their technology was outdated, their forces undertrained, and their people weak. The alien factions had no reason to fear humanity. Ethan didn't flinch. He had dealt with this kind of mockery before. This wasn't the first time he'd been laughed at for his appearance. His armor had been through hell, and many assumed that meant he wasn't a serious threat. But they didn't know the truth. Beneath the dents and scratches, Ethan was a soldier forged in the fires of war. His body, scarred from countless battles, was just as much a weapon as the suit he wore. He had survived where others had fallen, and that was what made him dangerous, not the armor, but the man inside it. One of the alien leaders, a particularly imposing figure known as T-Car, leaned forward in his seat. He was a massive creature with blue scales and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His deep voice rumbled as he addressed Ethan. "You are a relic, human. Your kind may have once been a threat, but look at you now. The war has passed you by. Your armor is nothing but scrap, and your people, they are nothing but a nuisance. Why should we waste our time negotiating with the last remnants of a dying species?" The room fell silent as the other delegates awaited Ethan's response. This was the moment where he could either rise to the challenge or let the aliens walk all over him. Ethan didn't say a word. He simply stood there, taking in the insults with the calmness of a seasoned soldier who had seen far worse than a few words. The tension in the room grew thicker as Lyra, a quiet but highly respected alien diplomat from the Zihar Empire, studied Ethan carefully. She had been observing him from the moment he walked into the room, and something about him intrigued her. His silence wasn't one of submission, it was one of control. The humans, she had heard, were unpredictable. She had seen them act impulsively in battle, but this human was different. He was controlled, patient, waiting for the right moment. The laughter continued for a few more moments before Tikar's voice broke through. "Enough," he said, raising a hand to silence the room. "If this human thinks he can make any meaningful contribution to this peace process, then he will prove it. We are done playing games. Let's hear what he has to say." Ethan looked around the room, his eyes settling on Tikar. Slowly, he reached up and unlatched the helmet of his armor, pulling it off to reveal his face. He was a young man, his features hardened by years of combat but still carrying a certain humanity in his eyes. His face was streaked with dirt and blood from the battlefields, but there was something else in his gaze, a quiet confidence that spoke volumes. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to argue. He knew who he was and what he represented. The room went silent. Even Tikar, who had been so quick to belittle him, now stared at Ethan in a way that no one had expected. The alien leaders were taken aback. The last thing they had expected was for the human to remove his armor and show them the man beneath it. To them, it was a symbol of humanity's fragility, a fragile body beneath a broken suit. But there was something unsettling about Ethan's calm demeanor, about the way he stood there as though nothing could touch him. Lyra leaned forward slightly, her curiosity piqued. She noticed something odd, something glowing faintly beneath Ethan's battle-worn skin just over his chest. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it was enough to make her wonder. What was this human hiding beneath his broken armor, and why was he so confident? As the room remained in stunned silence, Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You laugh at my armor, but it's not the armor that makes me dangerous. It's what's inside of me. What's inside every human. We're not here to beg for peace. We're here because we believe in it." He paused, letting his words sink in. The tension in the room was palpable. The alien delegates had expected him to cower, to apologize for the state of his armor, but instead, they found themselves facing a human who was neither intimidated nor apologetic. It was a rare sight, one that left them unsure of how to proceed. R's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Lyra's eyes narrowed, studying Ethan with a new level of respect. The other aliens, though still skeptical, couldn't deny the shift in the room. For the first time, they weren't laughing at the human. They were wondering if they had misjudged him. The stage had been set, and the next words spoken would change the course of the negotiations. Ethan Blackwell wasn't just a soldier in battered armor. He was humanity's last hope, standing in front of the alien council, ready to prove that the true strength of a species wasn't in its technology or its weapons. It was in the will of the people who fought for their future. The room was filled with the kind of silence that stretched far beyond its physical limits. It was as if the air itself had thickened, pressing in on everyone in the council chamber. No one spoke. No one moved. Every eye was fixed on Ethan Blackwell. His words had done what nothing else had. They had commanded attention. Ethan stood at the center of the room, his armor now discarded at his feet. His posture was straight, his gaze unwavering. He wasn't boasting, wasn't trying to prove anything, he was simply being. But the impact of his actions reverberated through the alien delegates like a shockwave. The laughter that had once filled the air had died down, replaced by a cold, calculated silence. They had laughed at him. Now they weren't so sure. The alien leader, Tikar, sat back in his seat, his expression shifting from mockery to something darker. His many eyes narrowed, observing Ethan with a mix of confusion and growing unease. The other delegates remained still, their faces impassive, but even they couldn't hide the subtle shift in their demeanor. Something about this human was unsettling, something they hadn't expected. Lyra, the Zihar diplomat, kept her eyes locked on Ethan. She wasn't sure what she had seen in him, but it wasn't the same as the others. She had seen humans before, brash, eager to prove themselves, quick to anger. But Ethan was different. He didn't react the way she had anticipated. There was a quiet strength about him, something that didn't need to be shouted to be understood. It was in the way he held himself, in the way his silence spoke louder than any words ever could. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then at last, Ethan spoke again. "It seems you've mistaken me for someone who needs to prove himself. he said, his voice steady and calm, yet it carried with a weight that no one had expected. I'm not here for your approval. I'm here because humanity has a stake in this peace. If you want to negotiate, then we'll negotiate. But if you think you can intimidate us, you're mistaken. His words were simple, but they held a truth that resonated through the room. The alien leaders had spent years viewing humanity as little more than a nuisance, a species that was just trying to survive in a galaxy that had no place for them. But Ethan's words changed that perception, if only for a moment. T-Car, who had once mocked him so openly, now seemed unsure of himself. His usual confidence, the arrogance that had defined his leadership, faltered for the first time. It wasn't just the human's appearance or his damaged armor. It was the way Ethan had spoken, the way he had stood his ground. There was something about him that made T-Car hesitate. He was not the weakling he had been led to believe. "What do you want, human?" T-Car finally asked, his voice less certain than it had been moments ago. "What is it that you're offering? Your species is on the brink of extinction. Your armies are scattered. You've lost. What could you possibly offer in exchange for peace?" The other alien leaders leaned forward, their eyes now fixed on Ethan. This was the moment they had been waiting for. They wanted to hear what the human had to say, what his species had to offer. They were curious, but there was also an air of superiority in their questioning. They still believed that they held all the power in the room. Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of their words not lost on him. He knew they saw humanity as weak. He knew they believed they had the upper hand. But what they didn't understand, what they couldn't comprehend, was that humanity had always thrived in adversity. When pushed to the edge, they fought. They fought with everything they had. And that was the one thing the alien factions hadn't accounted for, their underestimation of humanity's resilience. "What I'm offering," Ethan began slowly, his voice measured, "is the chance to live, the chance to end this war before it destroys us all. You think that your strength will win this war, but you're wrong. Every time you push us to the brink, we come back stronger. We adapt, we fight, and in the end, we survive." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Lyra's eyes widened slightly as she listened. It was clear that Ethan wasn't speaking from some lofty ideal or fantasy. He was speaking from experience. His words carried the weight of every battle he had fought, every life he had seen lost, every sacrifice made in the name of survival. The alien leaders exchanged glances, their expressions growing more serious. They were no longer dismissing him. T-Car's arrogance had been replaced by a wary caution, and the others were beginning to take note of the human soldier standing before them. Lyra, her curiosity piqued, spoke up. "You talk of survival, but survival means nothing without power. You're a broken species, barely holding onto the edge of existence. Why should we believe that peace with you would benefit us? What makes you think we should trust your word?" Ethan turned his gaze toward her, his eyes sharp but not hostile. "Because we've fought every step of the way, because we've fought for everything we have, and we don't give up, not now, not ever." Lyra was silent for a moment, considering his words. There was something about the way he spoke, his calm, unwavering confidence, that unsettled her. She had dealt with many species in her time, but the humans were different. They didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with something deeper, something that no amount of superior technology or alien strength could match. T-Car spoke again, his voice colder now. "You still haven't answered my question, human. What do you want?" Ethan took another step forward, his posture firm, but his expression softened slightly. "What I want is simple. I want to stop the fighting. I want to stop the bloodshed, but we can't do it on our own. We need your help. We need peace." T-Car looked at him for a long moment, his multiple eyes narrowing in thought. Then he chuckled, but it was not a friendly laugh. "Peace? You think we'll just hand you peace after all the death your kind has caused? You think we'll let you off the hook so easily?" Ethan didn't flinch. He had heard worse. He had seen worse, but he wasn't backing down. He knew the stakes. He knew that if this peace talk failed, the war would escalate and humanity would be wiped out. He wasn't about to let that happen. "No one's asking for mercy," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We're asking for a chance to prove that we can coexist, that we can work together to rebuild this galaxy instead of destroying it." The room was still again. No one spoke. The alien leaders seemed to be digesting his words, processing what he had said. It was clear they were no longer laughing at him. They were no longer looking down on him. They were listening. T-Car stood up abruptly, his massive form towering over the table. "I still don't trust you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. But I'm willing to listen. You've earned that much, human? Ethan nodded slowly, not because he had won. He knew that was still uncertain, but because he had made them see him, see humanity as more than a joke. That for now was enough. The first step toward peace had been taken, but there was still a long way to go. As Ethan stood there, facing the alien council, he knew that the real battle was only just beginning. The atmosphere in the council chamber had shifted, the once mocking air replaced by an uneasy tension. The alien delegates had heard Ethan's words, but the weight of his message hadn't fully settled yet. They were used to seeing humans as pests, quick to anger, quick to fight, but ultimately easy to squash. But Ethan Blackwell wasn't like the others. He had stood before them, stripped of his armor, and said things that made them question everything they thought they knew about humanity. T-Car, still standing at the head of the table, cast a long, hard look at Ethan. The alien warlord was no fool. He knew that the human in front of him wasn't the typical soldier. Ethan's calm demeanor, his unyielding resolve, it was something T-Car wasn't accustomed to. His people had faced enemies more powerful than humans, but they had never encountered a species that refused to lie down, no matter how many times they were knocked down. The other delegates remained quiet, clearly processing Ethan's words. They had expected the negotiations to be quick, perhaps a show of force, maybe a few insults thrown in. But this was something different. They hadn't prepared for a human soldier who wasn't afraid to stand up to them, who wasn't begging for mercy. Finally, after a long silence, Lyra, the Zihar diplomat, spoke. "You're not what I expected," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But that doesn't change the fact that your people are losing. You've lost planets. You've lost armies. What makes you think you can still win this war?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I didn't say we're going to win. I'm not here to make empty promises. I'm here to offer peace because I know that's the only way forward. We've lost, yes, but we've also survived. And we will continue to survive, no matter how many times you try to wipe us out." His words carried a quiet conviction that made the room fall silent again. The alien delegates had heard humans speak of survival before, but there was something different in Ethan's tone. He wasn't just speaking from desperation. He wasn't speaking out of pride. He was speaking from experience. The survival instinct that had kept humanity going through every hardship, every battle, it was alive and well in Ethan Blackwell. T-Car paced back and forth, his many eyes focused on Ethan. "You think your survival instinct will be enough?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can just hide behind that and expect us to believe you can offer us peace?" Ethan stood tall, his expression unwavering. "I'm not asking for your belief. I'm asking for your cooperation. This war has cost us all more than we can afford to lose. You may be stronger, but that doesn't mean we'll just disappear. Humanity has always found a way to survive, no matter how grim the situation. We're not asking for mercy, we're asking for the chance to negotiate, for the chance to build something better than this endless fighting." T-Car stopped pacing and looked directly at him. There was something almost calculating in his eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. "You're asking for us to trust you. After everything that's happened, you want us to believe that you can change the outcome of this war. Why?" Ethan's eyes locked with T-Car's. "Because we have no other choice. We're not here to beg. We're here to offer a future where we can all live without fighting over scraps. We've seen what this war does to everyone, to you, to us. It doesn't matter how many worlds you conquer. It doesn't matter how many victories you claim. In the end, we're all losing." Lyra spoke again, her voice filled with doubt but also curiosity. "And what would you propose, human? What kind of peace can you offer when you have nothing to offer but your own survival?" Ethan paused, then stepped forward slightly. "We offer the knowledge we've gained, the technologies we've developed even in our darkest moments. We offer the ability to adapt, to change. We offer our commitment to stop the war, not out of weakness, but out of strength. You've heard the saying, you can't fight fire with fire. We've fought long enough. It's time for something different." The room was still again. The alien delegates who had once thought of humanity as little more than a nuisance were now listening. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from mocking superiority to something closer to respect. Ethan's words weren't just heard, they were felt. He wasn't begging for mercy or for power. He was offering something more valuable, a chance for peace. T-Car was the first to speak after a long silence. "You speak of peace, human, but peace requires trust, and trust is earned, not given freely. I don't know if your species is capable of that." Ethan didn't hesitate. Then give us the chance to prove it. We're not asking you to trust us completely right away, but give us the time to show you we can do this. We'll start small. We'll work together one step at a time. Tikar snorted, a sound that echoed through the chamber. You expect me to believe that a species that's been nothing but a thorn in my side for years will suddenly change? What do you think you can offer that will make me trust you? Ethan's eyes never left Tikar's. I think you'll start to trust us when you see that we're not going away. I think you'll trust us when you realize that your victories are hollow and that without cooperation there can be no real peace. We're not here to threaten you. We're here because we have no choice but to find another way. The alternative is destruction for all of us. The room grew quiet again, the weight of Ethan's words pressing down on everyone. Tikar was silent, his mind working behind those many eyes of his. Lyra, too, seemed deep in thought. The other alien delegates exchanged uncertain glances, but none of them spoke. Ethan took another step forward, feeling the weight of the moment. This was what it all came down to. This was the turning point. He wasn't here to win them over with charm or force. He wasn't here to play games. He was here because humanity had nothing left to lose, and yet they had everything to offer. If you can't trust us, he said quietly, then let us earn it. We don't expect you to give us peace just because we ask for it, but what we do expect is the opportunity to try. The council chamber was still. The silence was oppressive, and for a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. But slowly Tikar stepped forward, his large form moving across the floor with an air of reluctance. He stopped a few paces from Ethan and stood there, staring him down. You're not like the others, Tikar muttered, almost to himself. I don't know if I can trust your people. But I'll give you this, I'll give you a chance. Ethan's eyes flickered, a glimmer of hope breaking through his otherwise stoic expression. That's all we ask for. Lyra watched the exchange in silence, her eyes narrowing as if she was trying to understand something that had just clicked into place. The other delegates said nothing, but the tension in the air had shifted once again, this time toward a fragile understanding. Tikar turned to the rest of the council, his voice loud enough to address them all. We will allow the humans a chance to prove themselves, but make no mistake, this peace is tentative. It will require the full cooperation of both sides. Ethan nodded, his stance still unwavering. We're ready. The alien warlord's eyes lingered on Ethan for a moment longer, then he turned away. Then let the talks begin. The air in the council chamber felt heavier now, thick with the weight of the decision that had just been made. The delegates were still reeling from the unexpected shift in the negotiations. Just hours ago, they had seen humans as nothing more than an annoyance. Now they were left questioning everything they thought they knew about the species. Tikar, the fierce alien warlord, had offered them a chance that none of them had expected. Ethan Blackwell stood still, his eyes fixed on the alien leaders. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew one thing. This was a turning point. The fact that Tikar had given them a chance to prove themselves was more than they had hoped for. And now it was up to humanity to live up to that chance. Lyra, the Zihar diplomat, had remained quiet throughout the exchange. Her eyes were thoughtful, but she had an air of uncertainty about her. She wasn't sure if she agreed with Tikar's decision to give the humans a chance. But she couldn't deny that Ethan's calm resolve had made her reconsider her previous assumptions about humanity. Tikar stood at the head of the table, his many eyes fixed on Ethan. His posture was less rigid now, less hostile, but his voice still carried the authority that made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy take notice. The humans have been granted a chance, he said, his voice cutting through the silence. But let me make one thing clear, this is not a gift. This is a test of your species' worth. Fail and the war will continue. Ethan nodded. We understand. Tikar's eyes narrowed as he regarded the human soldier. Do you? He asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. You may think that survival is enough, but peace is not something that comes easily. It requires more than just the will to survive. It requires trust, cooperation, and the strength to admit when you are wrong. Ethan met his gaze unwaveringly. I understand that better than most. We've been wrong before, but we've learned, and we're willing to learn more. There was a flicker of something in Tikar's eyes, something like respect, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. We will see, he said. This is not just about what you can offer us. This is about what you can offer the galaxy. If you truly want peace, then show us you are capable of more than just fighting. Show us that you can change." Ethan remained silent for a moment. He understood the weight of Tikar's words. The galaxy had been at war for so long that peace felt like a distant dream, something unattainable. But what if it was? What if, for the first time, there was a chance, however small, that peace could actually be possible? Lyra spoke up, her voice softer than Tikar's but still carrying the weight of authority. "You speak of peace, human, but what does that peace look like? How can we trust that your species is capable of bringing an end to this war?" Ethan took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. He knew that peace couldn't be achieved through words alone. It had to be backed by action. But how could humanity prove that they were capable of peace when they had spent so long fighting for their very survival? "The peace I'm talking about," Ethan began slowly, "isn't a perfect one. There will be no winners and losers, no grand celebrations. It will be hard, but it will be real. We'll start small with the things we can agree on and we'll build from there." Lyra tilted her head, considering his words. "And what do you suggest we start with?" she asked, her voice skeptical. Ethan paused, his eyes flicking to the rest of the delegates. "Trade," he said at last. "We start by opening up trade routes. No more blockades, no more embargoes. If we can work together, even in something as simple as trade, then maybe we can start to build trust. And from there, we can begin to work on the bigger issues, territory, resources, and ultimately, a lasting peace." Tikar's expression remained unreadable. "Trade," he repeated. "You think that opening trade routes will be enough to convince us?" Ethan didn't back down. "It's a start," he said, "and sometimes a start is all you need." The room fell silent again as the alien delegates exchanged glances. It wasn't the solution they had been expecting, but there was something about the simplicity of Ethan's suggestion that made them pause. Trade didn't require them to give up their power. It didn't require them to make major concessions. It was a way to open doors without risking too much. Lyra leaned forward slightly, her eyes studying Ethan. "You speak of trust, but how do you plan to prove that your species is capable of keeping its word? How do we know you won't just use this as a way to gain an advantage?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "You don't know, but you have to give us a chance. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes, but we're willing to try." There was a long pause before Tikar finally spoke again. "Very well, you've made your point. We'll give you the trade routes. But let me make one thing clear, human. This is your first and only chance. Fail, and you will find no mercy." Ethan nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. It wasn't a victory, not yet. But it was something. It was a step forward. Lyra seemed to soften slightly, though her expression remained guarded. "We'll begin the negotiations for the trade routes in the coming days, but know this, peace cannot be built on trade alone. If you wish to prove your species is capable of peace, you will have to do more than just open your markets. You will have to prove that you can put aside your differences and work together, not just with us, but with all the factions in this galaxy." Ethan nodded again, his voice steady. "We understand." As the meeting came to a close, the delegates began to file out of the room, each of them deep in thought. Ethan remained standing at the center, feeling a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. This wasn't the end of the war, not by a long shot, but for the first time there was a glimmer of something resembling peace. It wasn't much, it wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. The days that followed were filled with meetings, trade negotiations, and discussions that seemed to drag on forever. But through it all, Ethan remained focused. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced before. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of humanity, for the chance to build a different kind of legacy. With each passing day, the talks continued, slowly but surely. The alien factions were wary, their trust still fragile, but there was progress. Small steps, yes, but steps nonetheless. Then came the day when the first trade route was officially opened. It was a quiet affair, no grand speeches or celebrations. But to Ethan, it felt like a victory. It was a symbol that peace, even if only a sliver of it, was possible. As he stood before the newly constructed trade hub, watching ships from various species begin to dock, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was just the beginning, and there was still much work to be done. But for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. Hopeful that humanity had a place in this galaxy. Hopeful that, together with the other species, they could find a way to end the war and build something better. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was about something more. It was about peace, The days after the opening of the trade route were quiet but tense. Ethan Blackwell had learned that peace, especially one built from the wreckage of war, did not come easily. It wasn't just about opening trade lanes or signing agreements. There were 1,000 smaller steps to take, 1,000 ways for the fragile peace to crumble. But for the first time in a long time, there was something new in the air: hope. Ethan stood in his quarters on the ship, looking out at the stars. His reflection in the glass was a stark contrast to the soldier he had once been, more weary, more thoughtful, but no less determined. He had faced wars before, fought battles where everything was on the line. But this was different. This wasn't just about victory or defeat. This was about something that felt almost impossible to hold on to: the future. The negotiations for the trade routes had been slow, filled with challenges that tested every bit of patience Ethan had. The alien factions were still wary, their trust in humanity fragile at best. But they were cooperating, even if just a little, and that little bit was enough, at least for now. The door to his quarters slid open, and Lyra, the Zihar diplomat, stepped in. Her presence was always measured, but there was something in her eyes today, something that seemed to carry both curiosity and respect. "You're up late," Lyra remarked as she entered, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Ethan turned, nodding. "A lot on my mind." Lyra didn't press further. She had come to understand that Ethan's mind was always running, always focused on the next step. It was why he had gotten so far. It was why humanity still had a chance. "I just came from the council meeting," she said, her tone more serious now. "The trade routes are progressing, slowly, but they're progressing. T-Car is less hostile than before." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Less hostile?" he repeated with a small chuckle. "That's progress, I guess." Lyra smiled faintly. "Yes, in his own way it is." Ethan took a step closer. "What does that mean for us? Are they ready to trust us yet?" Lyra shook her head. "Not yet, but they're watching. They want to see if humanity can keep its word, if you can keep your word." There it was, the unspoken challenge. The aliens weren't convinced yet. They had seen humanity fight, seen them survive against all odds, but trust was another thing entirely, and it wasn't something that could be earned overnight. "I've been thinking about that a lot," Ethan said, his voice low. "How do we prove we're different this time? How do we show them we're capable of peace, of something other than war?" Lyra didn't respond immediately, but her gaze softened. "It's not about proving it all at once. It's about the small actions, the things that add up over time." Ethan nodded, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "You're right, the little things." She took a step forward, her voice softer now. "They're starting to see that in you, Ethan, the council. They're not sure yet, but they're willing to give you a chance." He met her gaze, a glimmer of hope rising in his chest. "And what about you?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. "I've always believed in giving people a chance, but I don't trust easily." Ethan smiled, though there was a tiredness in his eyes. "I can't say I blame you." Just then, a soft chime sounded from the comm device on the wall. Ethan looked at it, then at Lyra. "That's the council," he said. Lyra nodded. "We should go." The two of them walked out of the quarters and made their way to the main meeting room. As they entered, Ethan could see the council was already assembled. T-Car, the leader of the alien warlords, was at the head of the table, his many eyes scanning the room as usual. The other delegates were present, as well, their faces a mix of wariness and curiosity. Ethan stepped forward, standing tall, his posture confident but not arrogant. He had come to realize that in this room, in this moment, he wasn't just representing himself. He was representing humanity, and that thought weighed heavily on him. But he was determined to make it work. For them, for everyone. T-Car didn't waste time. "The trade routes are proceeding," he said, his voice carrying the usual force that made even the bravest warriors hesitate. "But there are still doubts." Doubts about humanity's ability to follow through. Ethan didn't flinch. "We've kept our word so far," he said, "and we will continue to do so." T-Car's gaze didn't soften, but he didn't argue. "We'll see, but actions speak louder than words. You've taken the first steps." "But there's still much more to be done." Ethan nodded. "We're ready, we'll prove ourselves." The room was silent for a moment as the alien leaders exchanged looks. The tension was palpable, but there was a shift in the air, a quiet sense that they were all on the verge of something new. Not peace, not yet, but something that could lead to it. Lyra spoke next, her voice measured. "There is still one issue that needs to be addressed before we can move forward with the trade agreement." Ethan turned to her. "What's that?" Lyra glanced at the council, then back at Ethan. "The question of territory." You see, the aliens that remain in control of certain systems are still wary. They're not sure what the future holds. Some factions are still holding on to their power, and they're not going to give it up easily. Ethan's face darkened. So, what does that mean for us? Lyra's eyes were serious as she met his gaze. It means that there are still factions who believe they will only be safe if they're in control, and they're not going to let go of their holdings without a fight. Tikar leaned forward, his deep voice rumbling through the room. The negotiations won't succeed unless we can agree on this. We can't move forward if the factions that control these systems continue to resist. Ethan took a deep breath. He had known this was coming. There were always going to be obstacles. But this was the real challenge. If they didn't find a way to come together on this issue, everything they had worked for would collapse. I understand, Ethan said, his voice steady, and I'm ready to deal with it. If it means the difference between peace and war, then we have to be willing to compromise. We'll do whatever it takes. Tikar's gaze was intense, as if measuring Ethan's resolve. Compromise will be difficult, it always is. I know, Ethan replied. But if we don't try, then we're no better than the people who started this war in the first place. The room fell into a heavy silence again. Ethan's words hung in the air, his determination ringing through them. It wasn't just about the trade routes, or territory, or even the factions who were still holding on to power. It was about something larger. It was about making sure that humanity wasn't just a footnote in the galaxy's history. It was about showing everyone, including the alien factions, that they had a place here, that they were capable of more than just fighting and surviving. Very well, Tikar said at last, his voice more thoughtful than before. We will give you a chance to negotiate the territory issue. But know this, human, if you fail, it will not just be humanity that suffers. The galaxy will feel the consequences. Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I won't fail. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment there was a rare glimmer of respect in her gaze. We'll work together, she said quietly, but we need to be ready for the challenges ahead. As the council meeting drew to a close, Ethan felt a renewed sense of determination. The path ahead would not be easy, but he knew it was one worth walking. Humanity had been given a chance. This was their opportunity to prove that they could change, that they could build something better than war. The negotiations weren't over. The battles weren't won. But there was hope now, and for the first time, Ethan believed that peace might just be possible after all.